I was thinking about as I grew up how things changed with the television. My parents didn't even get a television until I was about 4 years old, and even then, Lord have mercy, that thing was archaic with the way it put out a signal or picked up a signal, or however you want to word that. I know there was a big old antenna that we had up on the side of the house on a pole to be able to draw in any kind of signal to it at all. And even then, what we got on it was real snowy and not a very good picture. And it was a black and white TV. They didn't have color TVs back then, and you only got a couple of channels on it. There was no such thing as a remote control. There was a dial on the TV that you would change the channels by, and I was the remote control. Daddy'd say, change the channel. And I'd have to get up and change it for him. Uh, they had a lot of news shows and things like that on back then. Uh, was, gosh, I'm trying to remember their names. Gosh, can't even remember. Hunt and Bradley or something was the one team, and then there was Walter Cronkite was on another channel. You always have to watch the evening news. Daddy not miss the evening news. Hey, he wouldn't recognize the evening news if he watched it now. That's the way it's manipulated. I mean, besides having that antenna, that big old, I mean, they were big old, bulky, ugly looking antennas that was up on that pole. There's rabbit ears that you also had on the TV to help improve the signal. And two metal spike things that poked up out of a little round deal there on top of the TV, and you could point them in different directions to try to bring in the signal a little bit better. And sometimes you even had to wrap aluminum foil around them to try to help bring the signal in a little bit better. And it hooked up to the back of the TV set there. It was supposed to improve it some way, but I never could tell that it did a whole lot of good. Every time you let go of the doggone thing, the picture would go back to ugly again. And then they increased it. We got up to 3 channels, and then they brought up on UHF. So you had another dial on the TV. If you got you a new TV that had UHF on it, and you had your dial for your VHF, and then you had a UHF dial that you turned, and you get 2 or 3 channels maybe on that if you were lucky, and depending on how the weather conditions were, because if it was rainy or ugly outside, you wasn't going to get much of a signal into your TV. And then as time progressed, they came into color television sets, and they got more programming on the TV. And for a while there, for a long time, the TV would go off after the 11 o'clock news. They put on a signal thing on the television set, that test pattern signal, I think they called it. And there wasn't no TV until the next morning when the news came back on again. And that went on for a long time. And then they got so that they'd show late night movies, and then TV'd go off maybe 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And then they got so they just play it all the time as years progressed. More and more channels. And then you got cable TV, added more to it. You could get all kinds of channels. Now they've got, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of channels that you can get if you want to pay for TV. And still there ain't nothing on it worth watching. It's amazing how things have changed. We had the old tube TVs back when they first came out, and then it changed over. They got the Magnavox with the works in the drawer, and the panel pulled out there in the front of it with all kinds of transistors and stuff in there that they could change out if something went bad in it. But ours went bad a time or two, and it was always a big pain because TV'd be down for a week or so until they got ordered in whatever part that it needed for it. And that always seemed to be an aggravation. the weekends was the big time to watch TV as I grew up, because Daddy would try to enjoy himself a little bit on the weekends if he could. Farming and doing all he didn't get a whole lot of time for TV watching, but there were some variety shows on the weekends that they would enjoy watching, him and Mom. And Jackie Gleason's show would be on Saturday night, and they'd watch that. I forget what all kinds of shows there was on now, but I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that every Sunday night at 8 o'clock, Ed Sullivan was on TV. And you never missed the Ed Sullivan show, ever. Whatever you was doing, you dropped it to watch Ed Sullivan. I remember when the Beatles came to America and they was on the Ed Sullivan show, and girls went crazy over the Beatles, and Ed Sullivan couldn't stand them, but he had them on his show because they was popular, and he always hated them having on because the girls would have such a fit out in the audience and scream and yell. Oh my goodness. But yeah, times sure have changed. Now they got these flat screen TVs. They had the big old projection TVs there for a long time. It took up so much space in your house, and now they got rid of most of them, I think, and they've gone to these HD TVs and the three-dimensional TVs and the smart TVs, and all these flat panel TVs don't take up much space, and some of them they got in cabinets that even hide away and stuff, so you don't even know somebody's got a TV in their house. And they sure have changed things. And I often think about my granny. She I don't think she ever did have a color TV. I think it was black and white TV all of her life, and she watched that thing and had it on all the time. She'd sit in her chair and she'd knit and crochet, and she did a lot of quilting. Sit there with that big old quilt hoop and watch her TV shows. And she still enjoyed her radio, though, too. She had a radio sitting there beside her chair, and she liked to listen to programs that she enjoyed on the radio until they got so they pretty much took programming off and put it all music. But yeah, there's a lot of things back in the day, and I can remember going down visiting her at her house. It was after my grandpa passed away, and she liked to watch shows in the afternoons on the TV, and they had a show called Queen for a Day, and she always enjoyed watching that show, and the Art Linkletter show, and there was Truth. What was it? Trying to think what the name of it was. To Tell the Truth. That's what it was. To Tell the Truth. It was a panel show, and they tried to stump the panel, and panel had to figure out what the truth was and the things that the guest told them. There's a lot of old shows like that they had on, and one, gosh, I can't remember the name of it. Was somebody might leave it in the comments on this, but the one that they had Geritol as their sponsor. If anybody remembers what the name of that show was, I can always remember them talking about Geritol on that show. And then there's always soap operas. Now they've done away with most of the soap operas. There's not very many of them on anymore, but used to. You turn on the TV after the news went off at noon. They came on with soap operas that played all afternoon until about 4 o'clock. And they were about a half an hour long, and then they increased those to an hour long. So television programming sure has changed over the years, and it makes you wonder what it's going to be like in another, say, 50 years, 60 years, 75 years, 100 years. And with the way the media has been taken over and infiltrated by the corporations and the shadow governments, or whatever you want to call them, makes you wonder what's going to go on with that. But it sure is good to look back at the old days and see how things have progressed. And when they say that those is the good old days, they sure wasn't kidding about it, because things may have been a little rough, but it sure was a lot more relaxed than it is in these days. So it's fun to look back on things. And if you enjoy these story times that I do, be sure and give them a thumbs up and share them with people, and let them enjoy them too. I do this so you all enjoy this stuff. If I wanted to just talk to myself, I'd sit in front of a mirror. So with that, we'll turn you loose, and we'll talk to you later with a new story time. Bye.